Hello, Father. How are you?
I'm great, Charles. How are you?
Living the dream. So I understand that you've had some time on the television. Well, not on the television, observing the television over the last period of time. I don't know when it was, but it was not recently.
No, it was the greatest event in sports and golf history, right? The Ryder Cup, which was in New York, and so I was spending most of my Friday, Saturday, and Sunday that weekend watching it.
Oh yes, the U.S. lost the Ryder Cup, so that was unfortunate.
It
right?
was,
And so we have to give a steel cup. The Europeans get to keep a metal cup for a year.
2 years.
They don't drink
2
out of
years.
it, or 2 years. 2 years.
Yeah.
So and then they're in Ireland, right?
Yes, I'm very excited for that.
Yes, but there was an Irish golfer, right? Who was at or he's Northern Irish. Is it offensive to call Northern Irish people
He's Northern Irish.
Or,
So I think a Northern Irish person would consider themselves Irish, but people from the Republic of Ireland would have a tough time with that. And if I am wrong, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend anyone. But Rory had a really interesting interview pre-Ryder Cup, I believe, and I had sent it to you because Rory was very pro-American.
despite playing for the Europeans, was this way to appease his attackers or onslaughters? Or was this
This was pre-attack.
So you were watching it, and this Northern Irish EU, non-EU citizen gave us a quote, and so we're going to play it.
Everyone wanted to make it in America. It's the land of opportunity. I still believe it's the greatest country in the world, and if you come here and you work hard and you dedicate yourself, you can be or do whatever you want. I am unbelievably grateful and lucky that I got to come to America early on, and I think success is celebrated here. I think there's a wonderful sense of work ethic, and yeah, as you know, I live here. My wife is American. My daughter is American. I have a lot of affinity towards this country, and I think everyone that lives here should have that same affinity because it is a wonderful place.
It's a very Irish thing to just go M. There's a sister of life that I'm close with who's from Ireland, and every time I see her, she goes, Father, I was wondering, yeah, M. And so there was a while.
It's like but M.
And there was a while where every time I saw her,
Father,
sister. I was thinking of that when Rory was talking.
Well, that was the main crux. We were talking about the unique isms of the Northern Irish accent. No, we're talking about, so he's very positive on the U.S., right? He's got American family, and he recognizes American culture, which is unique, right? I think for much of us, right, we're the third largest country in the world by land area, and so, or fourth, depending on how you count. And so because of that, we spend a lot of our time among our fellow confreres, or fellow countrymen and women. But it's easy to think that that's how the rest of the world is, but it isn't, right? American culture is unique. We have hamburgers and French fries, even though hamburgers are from Germany and French fries are from Belgium. But we bring them all together. And the hot dog, I think that's melting pot, right? Yes. But I think what he's talking about is the values of success and hard work, right? Those are things that are obviously other cultures have hard work and success, but it is something that obviously is very big in America. Like I remember I once met with a businessman from Dubai who had a British accent, so I don't know entirely his whole history, but he said, I love coming to America because you guys just agree to do stuff and do it. And it's like, there's not this talking about it, let's think about it, let's refer to a committee. It's just like, yeah, that's great, let's do it. And it does. Like we're the world's largest economy, and our poorest state, Mississippi, has a higher GDP per capita than Germany, which is the wealthiest country in Europe. So,
which is wild, but it's the American dream, right? It's the principle of kind of the founding principles of this country, which are like, it's hotly debated politically. This idea of like nationalism, but I think just not even to touch that, but I think just this idea of like America is really a place where so many things can happen. And the fact that one of the largest golfers in the world chooses to live here and not in the country where golf was invented, right? He lives in Florida in a very beautiful house. You can see it on the Netflix show Full Swing.
I'm really into golf, Father.
It's a great show. I recommend it. But I think that sense like that he really captured is like he's. And I also think it's nice to like you said, like a reminder, like to hear people who moved here and are grateful that like America helped him flourish, and like he can see that and recognize it. I think helps us see like the amount of opportunities that we have. And granted, not so many people are as fortunate as we are, but there still is like that sense of like, oh, you want to do it? Like we can do it. And are there somebody who can help you and make that happen? Right, New York City. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
Yes, you can. Right. Well, yeah. No, it's a country of so we bring a lot of different things from a lot of different cultures. Right. Sort of like the best parts of it all rise. So it was like a menu at an American diner. Right. Like all these great little things are taking it all apart, and so
good.
You can have eggs and French toast, and which French toast is dessert in France. And in America, we're like, well, eat it for breakfast. And so, and then you have waffles, which are Belgian again. The Belgians gave us a lot of fries and waffles. We don't mix those two together as much. But, and so we have all these unique things that make our country quite a unique place to live. And it's wielded a lot, right? We're the superpower, the sole superpower in the world, right? And our culture is so pervasive. Like I always like talking to an Uber driver who's like a recent immigrant, right? Kind of, you make chit chat. I know you maybe aren't as chit chatty with Uber drivers.
I think you've told this story before. Now, I can't remember.
Yeah, maybe did I tell it last time? I probably did. Yes, about that. But no, in general, just ask Uber drivers. Worth repeating. Ask them why they picked to come to the U.S. if they're recent immigrants, right? Don't just ask random people, why'd you come to the U.S.? Well, I was born here. But like some of them, I say, I said, hi, how are you? And they're like, hi, I'm so and so. I got an Afghani Uber driver the other day, and but like a lot of them, why did they come to the US? It's like movies and also the opportunity to make it here, right? And so and the movies are a big part of our culture. There's a lot that we've given to the world, right? We've given the longest written constitution in existence. So there's no country that has a written constitution older than ours, which is quite impressive. I mean, France, they're on their 5th republic, and the UK never wrote theirs down. So, we have kind of that going for us. And obviously, there's a lot of new countries that have had broken off and different things. So they are on a more recent history. But there are a lot of things we've given to the world in terms of innovation industry. Like of the 25 largest companies in the world, most of them are in the U.S., and those create products all around. So the iPhone is ubiquitous, right? And the moving assembly line that comes from Americans, right? Henry Ford. And how that's
we've even given the world the new Pope.
We've given the church the Pope. So what is there left to do? Boris Johnson is an American citizen, or was. He renounced his citizenship. So yes, there's a lot. Half of Churchill's mom's American. So we've done, a lot of giving to the world. We've been to the moon. And there's a lot to admire and unique about. I'm not going to talk about the moon landing. It's for another episode. But there's a lot of things we've given to the world, and that has inspired the world. And other countries have modeled their governments, right, and recognized things that we've done that have been successful. And so it does definitely, it's a big epochal change. Is that a word? Epical?
An epic change. Let's just say an epic change.
An epic change.
But there is something.
There's a change of epochs.
There is something that we've given to the world that I think most people don't really know about, and it's not a great thing. And America has contributed a heresy to the world.
Oh, what a fine pivot there, Father. I was wondering how we were going to branch this. Yeah,
so good at just smooth transitions.
I don't know if we gave a heresy as much as something was identified that someone said was a
us.
heresy. I mean, yes. And what is that heresy?
Americanism. It's a
Americanism, which has which should categorize as there's other uses of the word Americanism.
But
we're talking about
in the church, when you talk about Americanism, they're talking about a heresy. And I think, well, first maybe should we define what a heresy is?
Yeah, that might be helpful, right? So we can let our heretic listeners know that they're heretics, right? Not all of you are listening.
Well, so this is the thing is, right? Like people, and I think this is a very important thing to just throw out there. Calling somebody a heretic is a very serious thing. And there are a lot of people who I'm pointing my pen now to make my point to our listeners, and every word that I'm speaking. When you call someone a heretic, it doesn't mean that they're a heretic. The church has,
Wait. It's like calling someone an idiot doesn't mean they're actually an idiot.
The church has to officially say this person is a heretic, as in they're formally teaching heresy. Somebody can teach and spew heresy without being a heretic because it's just never been formally named that you're a heretic. Yeah. Heresy is false teaching, right? So it's a teaching that opposes the divine doctrine of the church. And so there are a lot of heresies out there, a lot of heresies that have been throughout history. Albigensianism, modernism, all this stuff. My famous lecture in moral theology class at the seminary is always, we like to avoid isms. Modernism, socialism, capitalism, and then I raised my hand. I said, Catholicism? Yeah, you get the point. So Americanism in this context is what the church has defined as a heresy, and it has very specific qualities, I think, to point it out. I think, I don't know, when else, I'm blanking now, when else would you say like Americanism?
I was
like
Googling
in the normal world
about Americanism. It can also just mean like patriotism, like, you know,
which is good.
Which is good. Patriotism, which we'll talk a little bit about. What good, yes, but there's or other things, or maybe it's like you're against Americans, you're an Americanism person, right? Like, anyways, but yes, in the context of this, we'll talk about what it is.
I see what you were saying there. And I think it's important that the connection. There's so many connections here. That it was Leo XIII
who condemned,
not the 14th, not the American Pope, but Leo XIII who condemned Americanism.
Yes, and well, maybe we should tell people what Americanism is, Father. What is Americanism? It's a heresy, and it was determined as such by the venerable, although he's not actually venerable, Leo XIII. I mean, he's venerable, small v. He's not been declared
venerable in our eyes.
In the eyes of Holy Mother Church.
Yes. Yeah. So Americanism, it's funny because Leo XIII condemned this in 1899, I want to say. Yeah, that's his letter to Cardinal Gibbons, which we'll reference and we'll talk more about. But he kind of outlines 4 principles of Americanism. And I think the short way of putting it is Americanism is this idea that we have to adapt to society. The church should adapt to the culture of America. Well, not necessarily America because they have it anywhere, but the church should adapt to the culture and relax her rigor, her doctrinal rigor. So I think that's the kind of like the basic definition of it.
Yes. And to use Leo XIII's words, he says, the underlying principle of these new opinions, being Americanism, is that in order to more easily attract those who differ from her, the church should shape her teachings more in accord with the spirit of the age, relax some of her ancient severity, and make some concessions to new opinions. And that comes from America's founding, where we did change some things, right? So we broke off from a monarch, right? And we separated our government into 3 branches and made sure each branch could stop the other one from doing stuff, right? Instead of trying to find efficiencies. And then our country was really big into, kind of, sort of an individualism, right? A rugged individualism, as we say, which we could talk about, I think, a whole nother episode. We could talk a little bit now. But the rugged individualism American, I should have my Tocqueville quotes ready. I don't have any right now. But Alexis de Tocqueville, or you could say Alexis de Tocqueville, if you want to speak. I don't know if that's French accent or not, but it sounded good, at least to me. But he talks about that American individualism isn't truly like, that guy who there's a guy in Alaska who built and lived there forever. He built his own cabin. That's something you can do in America, but also there's more of people living in small communities, and that you're self-reliant, right? Pulling yourself up by your bootstraps because you left a country with nothing, right, in your pockets, and then you're building a new life here. So there's that kind of hard work. You're sort of foraging for yourself. There's not a lot of things that are given to you that you have to make your own. And also recognizing that there's a plurality of cultures and different types of individuals. Like we didn't have an official language up until very recently, and it's still questionable legally if we have an official language. But like we don't have a state religion. Many other countries have state religions or a religion that gets pride of place. And so there were a lot of principles of kind of liberalism, small L, not American.
Charles, it's tied into the American idea of freedom, right? Like individual freedom. Is that kind of the point you're making?
Yes. Exactly, right? We have life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? And so we're big into freedom fries. So then we're going to not a French fries. So yes, the freedom is a big part of what our thing is. But just because we want our government to not inhibit our personal freedom doesn't necessarily mean we want the church to inhibit our personal freedom.
Well, we would say the church protects and upholds our freedom. Yeah.
Well, yes, because, and to quote our fine friend, the dangers of confounding license with liberty is what Pope Leo says. And so I think, yes, we can have a government that says if you, and to quote Ron Swanson, want to balloon up to 100 pounds or 1,000 pounds, what's he say? I should get this quote right when quoting Ron Swanson.
I'm going to eat this steak with a side of steak and smoke this cigar because I'm a free American.
Well, he says that. But then he also says... the whole point of this country is if you want to eat garbage, balloon up to 600 pounds and die of a heart attack at 43, you can. You are free to do so. To me, that's beautiful. And so that is actually, I think, a good example of Americanism because I think the U.S. understands that the state maybe is more deferring to individuals and saying, hey, we're not going to stop you from having plastic straws. Oh, wait, they did. And that was a whole controversial thing. But, right, I remember I heard on a podcast, America innovates, China imitates, and I'm not going to lose my visa now, and Europe regulates, right? And so recognizing that those things, it's true, none of the 25 largest market cap companies in the world are Europeans because it's a different kind of economic strategy. So we have a government that really defers a lot to the individuals, right? We have rights to own guns, right? When I go on trips for work and I interact with foreigners, always like asking me about guns, like how many guns do you have? Do you have guns under your table at breakfast?
That's an amazing image.
Not quite like that, but it's like breakfast food and guns. That's America, also, recognizing that, the state, like the Soviet Constitution, right? And this is what Justice Scalia said, which I've not read the Soviet Constitution recently. So
Can't say I've ever read it. 100%
vouching with the statement, but I guess he talked about one thing: the rights were guaranteed but weren't followed up. But also the rights in the Constitution were the rights of the state, the prerogatives, right? Versus in our Constitution, they say these are the things the state cannot do, right? It's the rights of the people, and recognizing that the state is confined rather than the people being confined to the state. And so very interesting principles that have made a lot of exciting developments in the economy and personal lives and other things. But for the church, should we switch to a tripartite or three branch church where we can have representatives and vote on doctrine and have liberty and license? What would you say to something like taking American beliefs into church government?
The church is already having enough trouble. I don't think switching. It's the only absolute monarchy left, right, in the world. Because it's everyone asks, are you a Democrat or a Republican? I say I'm a monarchist because I'm Catholic. And that's a fun joke. But I think also too, like the
monarchist Catholic because of what? Is this we're gonna have to talk about? Is this like your Louis?
No, Jesus Christ is King of the universe.
King,
that's being pious.
Oh. I'm going to clarify for those who all of a sudden are going around.
We could talk about I could talk about the French kings for a while. But
another episode.
But no, I think too, right? Like the American idea of freedom is that I think it's an important definition to discuss because I think American understanding of freedom is freedom from oppression, freedom from government involvement, freedom from anything, right? Like anything that oppresses me isn't that exactly in contradiction with my freedom. Whereas the church has always taught that freedom for is what true freedom is, right? Freedom is the ability to choose the good, right? Freedom for excellence, as the medieval theologians have defined it. So like this idea that like St. Paul can be in prison and still be free. I think, have you ever seen that movie about Franz Jägerstätter? I think it's called A Hidden Life.
Yes. Oh, it's a fun one. Very beautiful. Good to watch it at a large screen. Right.
Yeah. Well, so if you remember, this is a spoil, but it's come out. It's been out for years now. So
And it took place 90 years ago. So yeah.
So Franz Jägerstätter is, he was in Germany and he was in capture, and I think he had to sign something about conscience, right? Something to
An oath to Hitler. He had to swear.
an oath to Hitler, and he refused to sign it, kind of like an oath of fidelity or whatever. And he refused to sign it.
More. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's happened. And the scene is he's sitting at a desk with a Nazi officer, and he says, "Just sign this, and you'll be free." He's been in prison for a long time, and so he's like, "If you sign this, then we'll let you go back to your family and everything." And Franz Jägerstätter's response, at least in the movie, is, "I'm already free," as in like freedom isn't something you can take away. This is like John Locke's philosophy, which is very much an American position, understanding that in order to be protected or like to have a government and stuff like that, some freedom has to be conceded, right? You have to give some of your rights over to the government. Yeah, the social contract. But theologians we would say like you can't concede your freedom because there's like an interior freedom as well as it, right? So like you can. That's what St. Paul talks about, is bring up controversy and then not fully address it. But this idea of like be a slave for Christ. But like that doesn't mean not being free, right? Like it actually means being more free than you would think of like a slave naturally. So that sense of freedom, and I think this is also where it comes in conflict with what the church is teaching America and the church, because this freedom from things and like the culture and everything is like, well, the church sometimes seems as a set of rules set out to ruin my good time. But when I'm thinking it's freedom from things and I want to be licentious and be able to just do whatever I want to do, you'll realize very quickly that that's not true freedom. It's actually very oppressive. The story I tell students is I refuse to eat at Cheesecake Factory because I find Cheesecake Factory oppressive. You go sit down and they have a menu, which is a book. It's like Lord of the Rings length with like all these options to eat. And it's like, here it's like the American dream. Like I have unlimited choices, but it's so hard for me to choose because there's so many choices. It's like the Netflix phenomenon, right? Where you just spend more time looking for a movie than actually watching a movie, right? You're oppressed by choice. Whereas my favorite restaurant, which is in the DMV area, is medium rare. Have you been there, Charles?
I have been to be. I think you and I went to medium rare.
We went there with I think we went with Danny and Jackie and some other people, and my friend's wedding reception was there during COVID. It was glorious. But it's a prefix menu. The only question they ask you is, how do you like your steak? And if you don't say medium rare in a place called medium rare, you're kind of a loony. So, but you get a salad, steak, and fries. This is
more fries.
It's a heavy French fry. And then when you're done, they give you more steaks and fries, and then you get a dessert. But like you go there and you enter into the idea like, this is what they do and this is what I'm gonna get. I haven't seen anyone go to medium rare and be like, do you have any anything else? It's like, no, like, this is what we do. It's a prefix menu.
Yes.
They have a vegetarian option, and whoever just eats portobello mushrooms, I would like to talk to you because I just want to understand. I don't get it.
I think it's more if you show up and you realize, oh wait, they only serve one thing here, and I don't want to eat French fries and salad. Although to me, that's my diet. I'm on the French fry salad cleanse.
Oh, yeah, we should start that. We should trademark that.
Yes, it should be. Yeah, it's gonna be our Lenten challenge. Is your diet only French fries salad. But no, I think you bring up a good point because like Amazon, there's a plethora of choices, and in many ways it's great because you can find like the exact type of bicycle belt that you need, right? Like it's not the Soviet Osasifun bicycle belt, which is more German accent there. So more there's like an East German bicycle company, but where there's one, right? We could say, oh, I need one that's aerodynamic and pitches at this decibel and all that stuff, which is fascinating and great. And in the market, you can have a lot of options, which is good. And also in the church, there's great diversity, right? We have all sorts of different saints, different religious orders, all these things. So diversity is not the problem, or multitude of choices. The problem is when you start to apply that to morality, right? So we have great principles in our government and our way that we want our government to act or not act, but we don't necessarily say, oh, well, the way our government acts is how the church should act, right? And so therefore the church should be withdrawing, and the church should be just, treading lightly and give huge latitudes to the citizens and let the citizens do whatever they want, or the faithful do whatever they want. No, the church is designed to guide and to usher. It's like you can have a basketball coach who says, like, this is how you dribble, and this is how you run around with a basketball, and this is how you shoot, and this is the right positioning, right way to pass, all this stuff, right? And those are very disciplined, regimented, specific, and the coach, if he doesn't like you, can bench you, right? If you're late for practice, he can take you off the game, or take out the game. But if we wouldn't want the government doing what we want, like stormtroopers to say, you're playing basketball wrong, therefore we're cutting out your ability to access food, right, or something, right? There are countries that have done that. That have
social
said
credit
you did not,
system, right?
clap along the social credit system in the People's Republic of China. Or I heard a story once about, and this may not be true, but if it isn't, it should be, to use your line, where in the Soviet Union, there was a room in some desolate fringe part of the Soviet Union, like Serbs in I don't know, is it Serbia? Not Serbia.
Siberia?
That's a former Soviet country, but Siberia, the other spelling. In Siberia or some other place, there was a room with a bunch of citizens of the Soviet Union. And they were listening to Comrade Stalin give a speech, and they all stood up at the end and started clapping. And like they clapped for a very long time, longer than like is normal. And then like the first guy who stopped clapping was like taken away, and he was sent to like some worse place than Siberia. And then like the whole point is, right, that was a hyper legislative freedom. Like we live in a country where you can clap for the president or not, right? And we'll use a Reagan joke here. He said there's an American and a Soviet talking, and the American said, I love my country. It's free. I can go to Washington, D.C., Pennsylvania Avenue, go to the White House, go into the Oval Office, and say to the president, banging my fist on the Resolute desk, I do not like how you are running this country, Mr. Reagan. And I can do that. And there's no law against that. I mean, yes, you should run in the White House. Like there's rules about how you get appointments. But as far as there's not rules saying something like that. And the Soviet says, I'm American, I could do this in Russia. He's like, you can do this in Russia? He says, yes. I can go to Moscow. I can go to the Kremlin. I can go in and meet with whatever the person who's in charge, the Secretary General of the Communist Party or whatever it is, and say, stand my hand on his desk and say, Mr. Gorbachev, I do not like how Ronald Reagan is running his country. So
That's a great joke.
Isn't that a funny one? And so, but that's the thing, is that we love our political freedoms, right? Which are great, and that have allowed for prosperity and have allowed for this church, which was not originally a very widely accepted religion at the founding, right? It could have easily have become a, anti-Catholic, some sort of state like that many other countries had been. But rather than that, right, we have so great freedoms in the political life, but that doesn't mean that therefore I can do whatever I want in the moral life. Us as Catholics, we have a higher calling, right, or a deeper calling beyond that. It's not just, I can do anything. The government doesn't, if it's not illegal, I can do it. Therefore, it's right? And so Thomas Aquinas says that, right, the purpose of government is to promote virtue, which is like, that's kind of a cop-out answer for everything. Like, what's the purpose of anything? To promote virtue, right? So I'm just saying at work, like, what's this screw for that you find on the floor? Like, promoting virtue. But if the state is to promote virtue, and right, Aristotle says it's between two extremes. I like to think of the state as preventing the extreme, right? Like,
right.
Being kind is good, right? Murdering someone is not good. And the state says you can't murder, but the state doesn't say, well, you have to be polite all the time, right? Even though it's good to be polite all the time, right? The state allows for a lot of discretion in where and finding that medium too. But the church obviously says, no, we are called to treat people with charity at all times, right? And so we have to respect that and acknowledge that. And but we don't want to say, hey, our American belief is primary, right? Like, are we Catholic Americans or American Catholics? Which is our adjective and which is our noun? And I always think that your Catholicism is first and foremost, and it doesn't conflict with a lot of American beliefs, but just because you run your government one way doesn't mean that's how you run your personal life and your morality in your church. So what do you think about it, Father? Or am I completely out in left field? To quote an American pastime. So
yeah. I think you said a lot. So it's I was waiting for you to call.
Keep it up with you.
No, it's you're extremely accurate. We're Catholics first, and then Americans is second, and also to remember, like, patriotism is a virtue. It falls under the fourth commandment to honor thy mother and father, and so it's but there's a balance, right? And when it comes to morality, right, I think like political freedom is I think that's a good distinction that you drew up. But morality is like we have a body and we have a conscience and we have a soul, and like it's ordered towards something, and to recognize that we are created in the image and likeness of our Creator, and that we are made for a higher purpose, reminds us of something and instructs us on how we're supposed to act, live, and breathe, rather than a particular people at a particular time and fads and trends like this. An example that many people use that I really like is like with playing a piano, right? Like I have the ability to just slam on the keys and ignore every rule of music theory that exists, but it's not going to sound good. But if I listen to the rules, the theory of music, then we can play, a great Schubert piece or Tchaikovsky or whatever it is, right? I don't play the piano, nor do I listen to it very often. But that sense of like the theory and the rules of the notes there's a natural resonance that sounds makes and everything that are pleasing to the ear, and so you could bang on the keys, like you totally have the ability to do that. Some would say like I have the freedom to play this piano however I want, but like that is not going to produce a good product, something beautiful. Whereas you do have the freedom, you also have the freedom to play them in the proper order, the proper sequence, to make something that is pleasing. And so it's the same thing with our lives, right? You have the ability to do whatever you want, but that doesn't mean that it's going to produce a beautiful outcome. Whereas if I follow the laws of nature and the commandments, which are fruit of the natural law, then you have a beautiful life, which we would say is a virtuous life. And also, I think too, it's really funny. Like this heresy was named over 100 years ago. But I think, when we were talking about its principles, which we can dive into, is like it does very much seem like still a mindset that's, I don't know if it's always been present in the church. I haven't lived in the church for the last 100 years, but I think now, like reading about what this heresy outlines, I think this is very much relevant to the modern Catholic in America, especially post-Vatican II. Where things appear, not actually, but they appear to be a little bit more relaxed. But that's not the case, especially the Catholic Church in America. So I think this heresy is not just like a relic of the past or something that phase that America went through, but I do think that like this is an important answer to how we're supposed to live our lives as Americans and as Catholics today.
No, it's a good point. I think the founding fathers recognized the need for morality, right, when they were setting up this country, because, yeah, I think to your points, talking about, right, we don't want to have where we can just bang all the keys on the keyboard. They don't necessarily want the state to say, this is how you play the piano, right? And so there's the quote from John Adams, which I was frantically trying to Google, because I couldn't remember if it was John Adams or John Jay. They should have had more different names than half them being named John. But that's why they like John Locke so much. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And recognizing that when you create freedoms, right, you then have to sort of police yourself, right? And that's where the church plays a role, right? And so Michael Novak kind of talks about how there's like the economy, there's the state, and there's religion, and he maybe calls it like morality and politics and economics. I can't remember what he calls the three, but we'll do an episode on Ambassador Novak. But he recognizes that they each have obviously relations to one another. Like the state needs to, allow for freedom of religion and not restrict your ability to practice your faith. And similarly, use our economic means to support both. But recognizing that our moral teachings allow us to enjoy this freedom, right? John Paul says, true freedom is not doing what we want, but having the right to do what we ought. And so I think that's what you're getting at, Father, right? Is that it's allowing us to go to Mass. Because like there's parts of the world where you can't go to Mass, right? Or where it's illegal for clerics, like in Mexico, right? In the early 20th century, you couldn't go out dressed as a priest father, right? You could get imprisoned for that or fined. And then, yeah, and in the UK, right, you couldn't run for office if you were Catholic, right, up until the 19th century when they allowed for some more freedom. They couldn't vote, right? And you had to pay fines and all these terrible things. So there were obviously a lot of oppression against the church, which the founders allowed for. But I think, to avoid the critique that, oh, Leo just is against America because, we are, a democracy and he comes from the 19th century, Italy and all this stuff. But he says he ends his letter very positively. He says, "A country which in past times has done so much for the cause of religion, and which will by the divine assistance continue to do still greater things." And so he recognizes that there is a unique value to the United States. And he had another quote that was positive. But he also talks about, he says, "We have no thought of rejecting everything that modern industry and study has produced. So far from it, that we welcome to the patrimony of truth and to an ever-widening scope of public well-being whatsoever helps towards progress of learning and virtue." So he's saying what's good in America is good. Like, good is good. Good is good everywhere. But, we don't want to necessarily take everything to its end in all places. And then there's another part of Americanism which gets a little bit into this, right? And maybe he kind of calls it the passive virtues and the active virtues, or that's how it's defined. The idea that there's certain virtues, like all the virtues are virtuous, but like some of them you don't really have to focus on, or they're from a prior history. And I think, right, he then says the doctrine of faith which God revealed has not been proposed like a philosophical invention to be perfected, but is divine deposit, the spouse of Christ. And so recognizing that, that which is true and good in history continues today, and that we're heirs. This isn't, our back of our dollar bill, it says Novus Ordo Secularum. What is it? New World Order, right? Which, if you looked on the back of that, I kind of regret telling you this now. I think you're going to look conspiratorial about this. But
we're not ready to reveal all my conspiracy theories or thoughts.
Yeah.
I had a thought. And what do I
you didn't want to
keep
reveal
talking? It'll come back.
But these active and passive virtues, right? And he says, to omit certain points of her teaching which lesser points, tone down many which churches always attach to them. So he's saying you shouldn't do that. Because
it came back.
Right.
It's the Pope Benedict quote from Summarum Pontificum, right? What was good and sacred in one age is good and sacred in another, right? Exactly. That idea that good is God is good. He's the source of all things, and he's immutable, unchangeable. So the good is not going to change. It may be communicated differently, and I think that's what Americanism is trying to. Maybe we could maybe give it the benefit of the doubt. It was trying to read the sign of the times and stuff, but that could also be quite dangerous in engaging the culture and such.
No, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, recognizing that yes, the U.S. is contributing a lot, and they should understand it, learn about it, think about it. But also, don't take every passing whim, right, and say, oh, therefore this is the end all be all. And again, we have a great country. I would argue the greatest country the world has ever seen, right? And that our Constitution has allowed for freedom and prosperity for millions of people. And those are all good things. The church holds that. But the idea that 1776 was a revolution against everything, like it's a true restarting of civilization. Like, no, right? Although to quote Ron
Swanson, history began in 1776. Everything before that was a mistake.
And that is Americanism. And actually, as much as I enjoy the character of Ron Swanson, I would say in somewhat he is, because he says he's a libertarian, right? Which libertarianism we can talk about all the time. But he applies it to everything, right? And where he says you can balloon up to 600 pounds, and I think that's beautiful, right? I don't think it's beautiful, right? That being said, am I going to coerce the state to make you run outside, eat healthier? Maybe not, right? But at the same time, you can recognize that differentiation. At least that's how I think about it. And again, there's a fine line, because you don't want to say, well, you can kill your neighbors. I'm just not going to kill my neighbors, right? Right? It's like, well, that's not it, right? There's certain things that are morally absolute, irrefutable. Never are they permissible. And so you want to obviously clearly prohibit that by the state. And there's certain things that have, right? So you look very excited to say something, Father, so say it.
No, a thought came to me, and you're definitely more read on this particular topic, but in recent news, right, like Amy Coney Barrett has been going on. Yes. She was did the interview with the Free Press and everything, and her book is coming out or came out. And that idea of and this was all in her confirmation hearings, was especially topics like abortion and stuff like this. What do you judge with your Catholic beliefs or your American or the law? And I think she's friends with John Garvey, president of Catholic U, who's very
President Emeritus.
President Emeritus, so I think that idea of like religious liberty and protecting that, but also like the Constitution is the Constitution, and you read it in a jurisprudence, right, rather than from a Catholic filter. And I think many Catholics have a problem with that, and also like people have a problem with that on both sides, right? Like she should be emphasizing and putting Catholic virtues and beliefs into the Constitution, or she should not be a Supreme Court justice because she's Catholic, right? The
dogma lives loudly.
The dogma
in me.
lives loudly in you. It's like, thank you. That's a compliment.
Yes,
but I think
I think
I just think that's like the crossroads that come up here.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah, because I think that's a really good example of the judiciary where things, and actually I had my whole giant Constitution primer book here because I was reading about religious liberty in it. But and I think we'd like to, at one point, I have a friend who used to clerk on the court, and I didn't want to ask him a lot of questions. But yes, the article that Justice Barrett wrote, when I think she was a student with John Garvey, who was our former president of Catholic University, and he was dean of the law school, or was a professor of law at Notre Dame, and that's how he encountered Justice Barrett. And the article was like, when you have your faith and your duty conflict, how do you handle that? And it's complicated, right? Because you may have something very black and white, right? Like we would say like it's great for everyone to be Catholic, right? And that's what we're working towards, try to evangelize and try to win by argument and example, right? That people should come to the faith. That being said, if a state somewhere requires a law that everybody has to be Catholic, and if not, you're going to be imprisoned, right? And that ends up on the Supreme Court. Our Constitution is very clear, right? That we cannot compel people to have beliefs, right? Or hold certain religious beliefs. And so what they were saying is, and again, I don't think the Catholics, there's like a serious movement to compel people with force, right? Force to join the faith. But if that came before a judge who said, well, I think that's a good thing, and therefore, but the law is very clear, the article says they should enforce the law, and if they cannot come to terms with enforcing the law, they should recuse themselves. Yeah. So I think that's a really good point, Father. And that's right for the state, right? And recognizing that we have laws that are very clear, very black and white, and what do the laws say? And that's what has to be the judge's job. The judge's job is to interpret the law, not to legislate, right? That's the legislature's job. And it's informed by morality. There's a sort of moral duty to say, hey, this is what we've done. It's a bit like, you may have a contract, right? It may be a one-sided contract, right? But if it's fully valid and legal, like that's what you've agreed to, and that's what you have to accept. And so, Justice Barrett talks about, because she talks about the death penalty and how she's opposed to the death penalty, but also recognizes that our state allows for capital punishment. And I listened to an interview where she gave, and I think it was the Boston bomber, and how on procedural grounds she talked about how there was no legal standing there's nothing against the laws of the state or the United States that would prohibit the ability to implement the death penalty, despite her own personal opposition to it. And again, we're going to talk. Before recording, we talked quite a bit about the death penalty, and so we're going to talk about that another time. But hot topic. So that's where that is. But I think it is recognizing that there is a duty to recognize what America has contributed, but also to understand, with everything new, the church always exercises caution and, wants to be deliberate and think about things. And I think what's really exciting about this letter is rather than, creating schism, right? Or like all of the bishops of the United States accepted this. Someone said, hey, it's not going on, but everyone else said, we agree with you, right? Or everyone said, we agree with you. Some said it wasn't even going on, because this was addressed to Cardinal Gibbons of happy memory. And so I think that's really positive, because there's times popes have written letters to countries and the bishops haven't listened, or the bishops have broken off, right? A la United Kingdom, a la Thomas More, right? That whole thing. Which I think we should episode on John Fisher, because to me, I think he doesn't get, like, Thomas More is a big fan, but he's got like a movie, and everybody knows that. But John Fisher, right? He didn't get a movie. Did he get a movie, Father?
I think John Fisher's he's in the Thomas More movie.
They mentioned it briefly. Thomas Fisher hasn't recanted.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of John Fisher because I went to St. John Fisher Seminary for college, and he's the only bishop in the in all of the United Kingdom who did not recant or sign the oath of fidelity to King Henry VIII, and it's like that's a big deal. And then
the only one. But think about it, and it wasn't like there were two bishops, like it was 50-50. But
and he was martyred for it.
Only one. He went against all of his peers. He was, which fun little judicial fact. So back when the church canon law was recognized as independent of civil, I mean, it still is recognized as independent, but when you had actual legal privileges, that a cardinal could not be put to death. And so, right, Father, you know this, right, where they tried to send him the red beretta to name him a cardinal because, and there was, what was it? I think Henry had like a snarky quote about Henry VIII, John Fisher, something about like, all right, this is... There was some quote because they were mailing him a red hat. Like there was a legal proof because once you get the beretta, right, which now is imposed on your head, but before it was the galera, and we could talk about police hats for a whole long time. But they were mailing him the hat in the mail or whatever the equivalent of the mail was. And if that showed up in his jail cell and he was a cardinal, he could. I mean, obviously Henry VIII said he was head of the church in England, so that's a whole other thing. He could have probably tried to declare whatever he wanted. But John Fisher would have been named a cardinal, therefore would have been subject to the Holy See because he would be a prince, and princes.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, prince of the church, eminenza.
Yes. Now you get it. So that's a part with some theories that certain people in the UK were made princes to prevent them from testifying or being subject to legal ridicule. But I don't know exactly where it stands today, what legal rights princes have in the United Kingdom. So John Fisher was named a cardinal, but he never got. But I thought there was like a fun quote.
Oh, because he's always pictured
like
in his carnational,
he gets the red hat.
like he's in his statues and stuff in the red and everything.
Yes, even though that's like Jerome was depicted as a cardinal, but he wasn't. They didn't even have cardinals back when Jerome was alive. But that's
why ruin fun things? Let's just, like you said, if it's not true, it ought to be.
All right. So someone said, "Hey, they're going to name Fisher a cardinal who's in prison." And Henry VIII is said to have responded to Fisher's elevation by saying that the Pope could send the red hat whenever he liked, but that the king would see to it that Fisher would have no head upon which it's placed.
Henry VIII.
Yeah, was that worth the hype and hyperbole? And that's why I have, for those who are watching, a cardinal's hat back there. So
stolen from a cardinal, but that's another story.
Stolen from a cardinal. It's John Fisher's hat back there.
Well, so the four principles of Americanism are kind of, we talked a lot about just an emphasis on personal liberty. That was a big thing. With that becomes a minimizing of doctrinal rigor. So like the church should ease up a little bit. And kind of tied to that is a relaxation of discipline. So the idea of like religious vows, priestly life, that kind of stuff, like church disciplines, piety practices, fasts, probably, because in this day and age, the fast was not even an hour. It was longer than 3 hours. It was all day, right? You had to fast from midnight until you could receive communion. That's why masses were so early. There was such thing as an evening mass back then. It's been a glorious time to be a priest. You have all night to sleep. Evening masses are tough. I just put it out there for anyone who cares. And then adaptation to modern culture, which I think is where we're at today. It's funny because all these points play off of each other, but that's what they are in some. And I think I don't know. I really think like when I was like studying up on this, I learned about it in the seminary in our U.S. church history class, but I can't say it really stuck too much there. But rereading it or rediscovering this heresy, I think it was just like, this is kind of where we're at now. Like there's Catholic infighting. You just go on like the Twitter wars, the X wars, whatever it's called these days. And Catholics are going against other Catholics, and this idea, especially because America is so politically divided, the church has found itself, I think, kind of trying to put itself in these camps, which I think is wrong, but also an effect of like the church should be more morally rigorous, and we should be on the street corners telling people they're going to hell and all this stuff, like you're living in sin and blah blah blah, fire and brimstone kind of stuff, which is a different type of poor evangelization. And then and the other side, it's like, well, we should just be like, get with the times. A number of people have told me like their biggest problem with the church is like the church should just like change its stance on like same-sex marriage or abortion or music. Like a thing that I have so many arguments on, or just maybe conversations is more polite and more accurate. But that idea that like the culture is changing and the church should change. And my response is like, church has been around for 2,000 years. This culture is like already like, what is it? Like I think we're beyond postmodern, and culture changes and evolves. Things disappear, fads go. And so like the church in many ways is like the protector of culture and things that last, right? The church has retained things that last and that are good, right? We see this in the liturgy with vestments and everything. Like all of our vestments that the priest wears and stuff are based off of Roman design and stuff like that, right? Like the bishops, the hats wear, the centers, candidates. We call our confirmandi candidates, and they wear white because, correct me if I'm wrong, Charles, but I believe that those candidates who are running for Senate would wear white and they give their speeches, and this idea that like that kind of merged. Pope Benedict talks about this all the time. Didn't talk about this all the time, but he emphasized it a lot. And it was most especially in the Regensburg Address, where he talked about the Hellenization of Christianity and this idea that theology and philosophy came together. And there's a trend to de-Hellenize Catholicism, which was to take out the Greek philosophy. But the Greek philosophy is what gave us the language and the vocabulary to understand the theological terms. And that was very much like the Greek intellectual life. And so I think Leo the 13th had this understanding. We talked about this, like the good that America has is like good for all. And so like there are things that American can give to the church, and we have in many ways.
We gave the church the Pope.
We gave the church the Pope. Like they finally elected American.
Well, what's
Pope.
What's the Chesterton quote about guard? Yeah, no, yeah. What's the Chesterton quote on tradition? Right? Isn't it?
Oh, it's great. It's something. I wish I had it off memory, but it's
something. Yeah,
something to do with like tradition is the voice of the dead, like the vote of the generations in the past.
But I thought he had another one too on. That's another one I think of. Tradition is the. Yes, tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. Tradition refuses to submit to the small and arrogant oligarchy of those who merely happen to be walking about. So recognizing, yes, that those traditions that were handed down, and similar like the American concept, right, where you take what's good, we take pasta and pizza and foods from fine countries around the world and make them part of the American tradition. But I thought he also had another one that's something about like ashes and, does that sound right?
I think, I don't know. I don't think so.
Yes. Gustav Mahler.
Same guy.
Same guy. His name begins with G. He said, tradition is not the worship of ashes, but the preservation of fire. Right? And I like that quote. So, because, yeah, it's recognizing that it's not, we take what's broken and finagled from history, right? Because the liturgy is that, and that's, I think, the church, it's got that integrity where the liturgy is ancient and modern, right? It's ancient as far as, all these traditions that have been added on over the centuries, but it's modern as far as it still is applicable to us today. And those teachings also care for. It's not like, we have an ancient liturgy, but then we do things really modern in terms of our moralities, whatever the popular poll is today, right? We carry all of those.
Well, and that's what
forward.
Tradition is. Tradition is literally a handing down. And so preserving that fire, that is the light of Christ, especially in the Catholic tradition, right? I think John the 23rd said this when he was opening the Second Vatican Council, right? We're going to open the windows of the church and open the door and let some fresh air in. But this idea was that the church could go out into the world and be able to speak the modern language, to be able to engage the culture. But then what ended up happening is the culture started to influence and engage the church. And so it really shouldn't be a two-way street. I've shared this with you before, and a number of people we know, right? It's the Hank Hill quote from King of the Hill. Is like Christian rock made neither Christianity better or rock music better. It made them both worse.
So, or to quote the two popes, right? A church that marries itself to one age will be a widow in the next. Cardinal George said, like, all are welcome, but on God's terms, right? Or something to that effect, right? And recognizing that the church is called to lift you up and to challenge you. And I think that's exactly what Leo the 13th did, is he, is not saying, America, this is what you're doing, that's fine, just keep going no matter what. Just, he's saying, you guys are doing so many good things, but you have to be careful that you don't let the principles of your government and your founding overly inform all the aspects of your life and the aspects of your theological understanding.
I think the tension is that America is a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. And so like this idea that it's very egocentric, and I mean in the sense of like it comes like there's like a personal investment, and that's why like the idea of like this individual freedom and this social contract, like in order for the government to have power, I have to enter into this individually. And so it's like very much people centric, whereas the church doesn't operate like that, right? The ultimate authority, the supreme authority is God, then conscience, right? And then the church. This idea that, right, that like the authority doesn't come from bottom up, which is very American, but from top down, right? That God gives us life, and He's the source of liberty and freedom. He is the source of all. It's all going back to Him. So I think that's the tension with an American mindset in the church. But so Charles, maybe how can we practically kind of avoid an Americanism mindset, but still live as faithful Catholics and good American citizens?
When there is a conflict or you feel a tension between your faith or what the church teaches and what's going on, what a president's doing, what a politician's doing, right? Pause and don't just jump with your party, right? I remember being told once, you're more likely to change your religion than your political party, right? That like our political party is so so innate to our understanding of the world. But there's times where like my original political beliefs, and then I've studied the church's teachings and I've changed, right? Or grown in that area and understood that the church's teachings, like, don't try to lead political party first or country first, right? It's like, I'm the king's good servant, but God's first, to quote Thomas More, another fine guy. Because yeah, we obviously are deeply patriotic. We love our country. It's given us so many blessings, but we also love our faith. And when there's conflict, right, our faith needs to trump out. It doesn't mean we try to overthrow the government, it doesn't mean we commit violence or anything like that, but it does mean that we have to sometimes say, no, what the government's doing is wrong, and here's why.
Yeah, and I think just recognizing that government is not the supreme authority. It has authority, but government can be wrong. The church can't. The church cannot err in teaching. People can speak in error, and people can speak in heresy, and we see that all the time. But like the church itself, somebody once said to me, like, they're mad at the magisterium because it's going like this. I was like, that's not what the magisterium is. The magisterium is like the safeguard. Like it cannot change, even though we want it to change. And so I think that's also too is like a moment of self-reflection. Is if I disagree with church teaching, like where does that come from? Or like, do I really understand what the church teaches? It's the Fulton Sheen says, right? People don't hate the church; they hate what they think the church is. And so my challenge is when you don't understand church teaching and you don't like it, like ask yourself, like, why don't I like this? Why doesn't this sit well with me? And how can I understand to grow more and accept this? Because as many as the American mindset, right? They want church teaching to change. It's not. It can't, and it won't. And so I think the more that we can accept that, I can change myself though. I think recognizing governments can be wrong, the church can't be, and like I think from there we can start to begin a better relationship with the church and stop acting like the church is a democracy, but look at our democracy with the eyes of the church.
Well, we appreciate you all joining us for this fine discussion. Or I think it was fine. We'll see. Subscribe or like or comment.
Do what you're supposed to.
Complaints go to Father Lomnitzer.
Yeah, do what you're supposed to. Do what you're supposed to do with podcasts, I guess. Share it. We'll include the letter.
Yes.
Testem Benevolencia, which we never named before the show, in the show notes or something. It'll be somewhere. But until next time,
it's on the
work hard and pray harder.